Hello everyone, welcome back to Iron Shield Media. Today, we're diving into what can only be described as a catastrophic month for Russia under President Vladimir Putin. A month where the Russian armed forces appear to have suffered a staggering loss of around 25,000 troops in a single month. We'll unpack how this happened, what it reflects about Russia's strategy and capabilities, and what it means going forward. From the exterior perspective, the broader scene is grim. Russia's invasion of Ukraine has stretched on for years, and despite the early hopes of quick victories, what we are seeing instead are mounting casualties, modest territorial gains, and increasingly heavy losses for relatively little to show for it. Some estimates put Russian losses in intensified operations at thousands of troops per day, and in certain sectors tens of thousands in a month. For example, one review of the war's Eastern Front suggests that Russian losses in a given month could exceed 40,000 personnel when counting killed and wounded. Sources show that conservative estimates place Russian casualties in late 2024 at around 1,500 per day. Atlantic Council +4, Wikipedia for 4 meters on a +4. The month from hell we're examining is emblematic of that broader degradation. The dilemma from the outside is, how did an army which for decades has been projected as a major conventional force wind up paying such a huge price for so little gain? On the surface, Russian armor, artillery, manpower, and logistics should give it an advantage. But the war has exposed major flaws: poor coordination, inadequate training, problematic supply lines, and an enemy's Ukraine that has learned fast and is striking back effectively. Turning quickly to the interior, the internal under-the-hood mechanisms of Russia's war machine, we see a system plagued by structural issues. Corruption, poor morale, overly rigid command chains, and forced recruitment are hampering Russia's ability to replace losses effectively. Fewer well-trained troops are entering the front, and many are ill-equipped or underprepared. While Russia may have manpower in theory, quality is going down. For example, there are reports of convicts and poorly trained recruits being pressed into frontline service. The cipher brief placed through Al J3 Media Zone +3. This mismatch is a key contributor to the high casualty numbers. When we look at performance, how the Russian forces are actually operating, the picture is alarming for Moscow. Large-scale offensives that were expected to break through have instead stalled or been met with severe resistance. One analysis argues that Russia's big summer offensive failed to achieve meaningful gains while suffering tens of thousands of casualties. Atlantic Council +2, the cipher brief +2, this suggests that Russian tactics, strategy, and execution have not matched expectations. The attrition is high, but the returns are low. Rather than swift victories, we see grinding battles, incremental gains, and heavy losses. The performance thus far raises serious questions about the sustainability of this war effort. From a safety features standpoint, loosely speaking in military terms, one would expect an army to protect its troops via adequate logistics, reinforcement, training, and equipment. In Russia's case, many of those features appear compromised. Reports suggest that Russia is employing tactics designed to reduce heavy equipment losses because drones and Ukrainian strikes make heavy armor vulnerable, and shifting towards smaller infiltration units. Al Jazeera +1, but even these adaptations may not fully compensate for the deficits in training, morale, and manpower. The huge losses themselves undermine the safety of any follow-on operation because they affect morale, supply, command cohesion, and local control. As for the unique selling points, what did Russia think it could rely on? Well, Russia had a number of advantages. On paper, a large standing army, significant reserves of equipment, strategic depth, and the ability to mobilize large numbers of troops. The global perception had been one of Russian strength and capability, long underpinned by Soviet legacy. But now we are seeing that those selling points are increasingly hollow. The large numbers become a liability when they translate into mass casualties. Reserves become less meaningful when replacements are poorly trained or demoralized. The aura of invincibility is fading. Let's talk about the price of this campaign. When we say 25,000 troops lost in a month, we are talking about a human cost: officers, enlisted men, volunteers, and conscripts. The downstream effects are huge: grieving families, degradation of unit cohesion, loss of experienced leadership, and a hit to Russian morale and domestic legitimacy. Then there is equipment tanks, armored vehicles, artillery, ammunition. Any lost piece is a cost not only in manufacturing but in training and time. Strategically, the cost is even greater. Russia may find that even if it wins territory, the price paid makes the victory Pyrrhic. You may have gained ground, but at such cost that the further campaign becomes riskier and less viable. In the specific case we're looking at this brutal month, the terrain of the battlefield, the Ukrainian defensive posture, and the Russian offensive ambition created a perfect storm. One credible estimate from the battle around the town of Avdiivka indicates that Russian forces suffered around 25,000 men killed or wounded during attempts to take a relatively small area. Wikipedia, these are astonishing figures. An attacker normally expects fewer casualties when gaining territory. Here we see the reverse, heavy losses for minimal gain. Let's walk through how this happened in practical terms. First, Russia mounted repeated assault operations with large numbers of infantry, armor, and artillery in terrain favorable to defenders. In such situations, casualties tend to be high for the attacker. Ukraine, defending home ground, knew its terrain, had dug in positions, and had access to Western-supplied weapons and intelligence. Second, Russian forces reportedly lacked sufficient tactical flexibility, and command and control appeared rigid and cumbersome. Third, the replacement of losses was being done with forces that lacked training and cohesion, meaning that units became less effective over time. Fourth, logistical issues and the threat of Ukrainian precision striking made Russian heavy equipment more vulnerable, forcing tactics that reduced casualties from equipment loss but increased personnel risk. These factors combined to make for heavy personnel losses. Now, turning to the human dimension, when 25,000 men are lost in a month, that is roughly 800, 900 per day in a 30-day month. If those are casualties, see killed plus wounded. The number of killed alone may be several hundreds daily. This is a shock for any armed force in any home front. It carries domestic political implications. How long can the state ask for such sacrifice, especially given that results are limited? In Russia's case, there is little transparency, but the signals are worrying. The pool of motivated recruits is shrinking. Public morale is challenged. The narrative of unstoppable force is undercut. Let's consider where the campaign price shows up in other domains. Economically, the cost of equipping, replacing, transporting, treating wounded, and replenishing losses is massive. For every soldier lost, there are associated costs: training a replacement, equipping them, integrating them into units, etc. Strategically, the war's ability to continue at current pace becomes questionable. Some analysts estimate that Russia's ability to sustain this level of attrition indefinitely is limited. Al Jazeera plus E1, the war may become a war of exhaustion in which Russia's resources, manpower, and morale are tested to the limit. In the concluding section, we must ask, what does this all mean for the future? If Russia is paying tens of thousands of losses per month for minimal advances, the sustainability of its campaign is in real jeopardy. The narrative of swift victory is gone. Instead, we have a slow, grinding, blood-soaked path. For Putin, domestically, the pressure mounts: how to keep support, how to manage casualties, how to prevent defections, declining morale, and a populace that may increasingly question the cost. Internationally, adversaries and observers will note that Russia may be less capable than portrayed. Its ability to project power, sustain a large offensive, and create strategic breakthroughs is compromised. More positively, from Ukraine's perspective, these heavy Russian losses may open opportunities. If Russia is bleeding manpower and not replacing it with equally effective forces, the balance of attrition may tilt. Should Ukraine and its allies exploit that, then the war's trajectory could change. Russia may be forced to scale back offensive operations, consolidate defensive positions, or seek ways to reduce its losses. However, we must caution this is not a complete collapse of Russian military capability. Russia still has vast resources, a large population, and nuclear deterrence. But what we are seeing is a shift from dominance to vulnerability. The unique selling points of Russia's military that we discussed are now under stress. The war is increasingly going in favor of defenders, or at least the attackers. Russia is paying more and more for less and less. So what should viewers take away from this? First, that the 25,000 troop loss in a month is not just a statistic, it's a signal of deep systemic issues. It shows that the war is not going according to Russian plan. Second, that Russia's ability to continue its war in the same way, with the same ambition and cost, is likely constrained going forward. Third, that for Ukraine and its supporters, this may represent a turning point in the attrition battle. Fourth, for global observers, it means that assumptions about Russia's invincibility or ability to wage protracted war without major consequence are flawed. In short, Russia has entered a phase where casualties are mounting rapidly, replacements are weaker, and territorial progress is limited. The month from hell may be a symptom of a longer-term decline in operational momentum. For Putin, this is reputationally damaging, militarily costly, and politically dangerous. For Russia's soldiers and citizens, it is a heavy burden. For Ukraine, it may be a moment to deepen pressure. For us as watchers of this conflict, it is a wake-up call that this is not business as usual. Thank you for watching this video on Iron Shield Media. If you found this breakdown insightful, please like, share, and subscribe for more in-depth reviews of global military and strategic developments. Stay tuned for our next video where we'll examine the supply chain implications and the weapons systems behind the front line losses. Until then, stay informed, stay safe.